From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
A new program aimed at addressing one of Kansas's most pressing shortages, teachers. Plus, school boards are becoming the new home for partisan debate, what this year's races look like. But first, Wichita mayoral candidates are seeing and spending green, a look into the financing behind them. That's what we're talking about right now on Kansas Week. Not only is the race to be Wichita's mayor probably the biggest one going on this municipal election cycle, it's also going to be one of the most expensive. Back on Monday, candidates had to disclose their financials, and we'll take a look at just how much they were able to raise and spend. Monday was the deadline for candidates in this year's municipal primaries to file their financial disclosures. In Wichita, that meant seeing how much money was going towards this year's mayor's race. Leading the pack by far in both fundraising and spending was former TV anchor Lily Wu. Wu raised over $200,000 and spent around $119,000. In second place was current city council member Brian Fry with around $92,000 raised. Safe Century 2 founder Celeste Brissett was third with $38,000, and current mayor Brandon Whipple was fourth of the major fundraisers, coming in at $34,000. According to the disclosure, Whipple has around $27,000 on hand going into Tuesday's election. Fry has $25,000, and Brissett has just about $4,000. Now, to dig into all that spending and what it means for this seat in politics in general, we have with us Dr. Neil Allen, professor of political science at Wichita State University. We have David Seaton, the publisher of the Cowley County Traveler, with us, and we have Chance Swaim, an investigative reporter with the Wichita Eagle. Thank you all for joining us. And, you know, as much as it's interesting how much money is being spent, it's also the people behind who's actually that money. We're seeing a lot of big groups. I think Chance and the Eagles looked a lot into it. It's just what are some of the influences at play with some of these donations?
Yeah, it's really interesting to look at it's as a journalist, it's not as interesting sometimes to see the names that are on there. You look at the ones that you can't tell who it is, right? There's all these LLCs, there's unions, there's PACs, there's things like that. You go look up who actually owns them. Sometimes it's the exact same person who gave, you know, a $500 donation, and they have 7 LLCs, so now they've been able to exceed the contribution limit. But outside of direct contributions, there's also a lot of spending a lot of dark money spending, frankly. Americans for Prosperity has poured $66,000 into a parallel campaign to get Wu elected. That's as much as the second place candidate has spent. That's on top of Lily Wu's $119,000 she spent. There's another $66,000 that were spent, which is the same that Brian Fry spent, who was in second place in spending. So you've got like a lot of money going in that direction. Even when if Fry would have not had Lily Wu in the picture, he would have set the fundraising record with what he raised. So it's really tough to know because money doesn't vote, but it does put, you know, a lot of influence in front of people's faces, and there's lots of development interests and people with city business pouring money into the race that could ultimately influence who's in there making policy and approving millions of dollars in projects.
Absolutely, and it is an astronomical amount of money that Lily Wu has spent so far, and we've seen raised. Dr. Allen, with these type of local races, especially a primary race, what is the impact of just having that amount of money being able to go into these campaigns and try to get people out to the polls?
Well, one thing to remember, like Chance said, is that money isn't a vote, so that one doesn't equal the other. And actually, there are a number of people that have given money to these candidates that don't even live in the city of Wichita, so thus can't vote. But it does help to get your name out. Celeste Brissett, for example, is a name that most Wichitans probably didn't know until recently. And even she, with $35,000 or something, is far behind the other two major challengers to Mayor Whipple. The fact that Mayor Whipple is fourth in fundraising is a danger sign for his campaign. Maybe he doesn't need it to get to the runoff because he has name recognition and support of the Democratic Party, but Wichita is not a Democratic city. So, money, but also to give another example, former city councilman Jason Cirillo was an appointed councilman, lost a narrow re-election. He's not raising any money. He's spending some of his own money, but I think his message, which might appeal to a lot of voters, is just not going to get through when you have, Lily Wu is spending more money herself than all the candidates spent last cycle, and she has other groups spending another basic campaign's worth on her behalf. And so if you're somebody who's voted, who's on a list, just be ready to get lots more cards in the mail in the next 2 or 3 days.
And we're seeing this money kind of break down over the different political interests and stuff like that. We've seen a lot of developer money and a lot of developer support just in their contributions going to either Brian Fry or Lily Wu. Definitely that kind of anti-Whipple coalition. David, you are outside of this area and where you cover it with your newspaper, but when you hear these type of numbers and this type of thing, what jumps out to you as someone who has covered local politics in your own area is just kind of the impact of these type of astronomical numbers again?
Yeah, we don't see that kind of money spent on the city commission races in Arc City and Winfield, Kansas. But all this money being spent in Wichita got me curious, and I wanted to remind myself that I was accurate. So I talked to the Ethics Commission director this morning, and he reminded me that state law actually regulates campaign contribution limits in cities of the first class like Wichita. So you can't give more directly anyway than $500 in a primary and then $500 in the general. But in second class cities, which most cities in Kansas are, I think there's 10 first class cities, they're unregulated unless they impose their own regulations, and he said none of them do. So theoretically, if you're running for mayor in a city of Arc City or Winfield, you could get $1 million donation and it wouldn't be illegal. And you do have to report what you get. That's a state statute, but the Ethics Commission doesn't regulate it. If you violated that, a county prosecutor would have to go after you, which never happened. So he said every couple of years it comes up like maybe we should regulate school boards or community colleges, but it never actually happens. They don't have the staff to do it anyway. So I just thought that that's something that people out there in the small communities might be interested to know.
And also, I should note here about advertising is, this station and the 3 other stations that have news departments in Wichita cover the western 2/3 of the state, about half the state's population. So that really affects what you can do with this kind of money. Because if you are spending on the Wichita mayor's race, you'll be lucky if a quarter of the people watching television could actually vote for you or actually live in the city. And so a lot of things that candidates might want to do with television ads, for example, and in other places, just is not a good use of money, so they have to find other places to spend it.
Yeah. Now, while that money, like you mentioned, is helpful to get the name out there for candidates, again, it still comes down to who casts their votes to decide who will be moving on to this fall's general election. Now, here in Sedgwick County, turnout has been slow to start so far. KAKE's Jocelyn Schifferdecker tells us the numbers of what's happened.
Kathy Teener lives in Sedgwick County. She says the last time she voted, she waited until the day of the election and stood in a long line. That's why this year she decided to vote using the advanced satellite centers.
I figured this would be so much easier, and it was. More convenient, easily accessible.
After you hand your ID to an election worker, they will ask you to confirm some personal information, then sign your name. You will then be given your ballot. As of 10:20 Thursday morning, less than 4% of people registered to vote in Sedgwick County had cast their ballots, said Sedgwick County Election Commissioner Laura Rainwater. In the days leading to the election, though, she hopes for more.
I would love for us to be at 35 or 40% because I truly believe that our local and state elections impact our daily lives more than the presidential years.
If you're registered to vote, you can do so at any of the 11 advanced satellite centers. The machines used have been tested and are not connected to the internet in any way. There are also seals on every machine and 2-person verification.
Our election security, that is #1 priority.
You can also vote early at the election office through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Then polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. on August 1st. If you don't have a way to get to your voting location, the City of Wichita is offering free bus rides to or from any polling place.
Now, I think the latest numbers from Sedgwick County as of today, there was only about 3,000 people who voted in person so far. Another, I think, 6,000 mail-in ballots returned. And so not a lot of people coming out. Dr. Allen, we'll start with you. When you're having this kind of low turnout, what candidates does it favor or disfavor? What does it kind of mean for this kind of outlook?
Well, we should note here that having low turnout in races like Wichita mayor is not surprising considering how we structure elections. This is in a year where we don't have elections for president, for Congress, for governor. Also, this is a summer primary where a lot of voters are actually not even in Wichita. And also with the weather right now, if you're somewhere else and you're marginal on whether you're going to come back here from someplace cooler, you might wonder whether casting your vote for mayor is worth it, although it of course is. And also, if you think about it, to get into the runoff, you're probably going to need 30% gets you there, 25%, I think we had 26% for the second place last time. That was 6,000 votes. And maybe there'll be more turnout, but still we're talking about a very small number of people that are needed to get into the race in the fall. And if any campaign had some magic way just to get a few hundred people there, they would do it.
Mm-hmm. And I think we've noticed, at least the last few years, especially post-COVID, numbers definitely go up on election. I think more people, especially with some of controversies around election officials, they're kind of more wary of mail-in ballots. And so, how do we go about balancing kind of this mindset and looking at how to boost turnout, how to get people out there, and just, I guess, the importance of interest in these type of races, David? I mean, for you guys, I know, how do you show more interest in these type of races and get more people out to care about, because these local elections matter so much? Yeah,
I know. It's kind of sad, frankly, the turnout that these elections get, 10 to 15% maybe. I mean, it's pathetic, actually, and it goes right at the heart of our democracy. It's kind of what we're all about. There are lots of ideas out there to boost them. I think from what I was reading, the biggest thing you can do is schedule them on an election that's a statewide election or a national election, and that probably would do more than anything. But there are things that other states have done, like same-day registration, automatic registration. If you have an interaction with the state agency, you can opt out, I guess, but I think state of Oregon has done this. Expanding hours of in-person voting, like on Saturdays and things like that. And so those are things at the margins that can help. I don't know about the apathy thing. It's hard to, if there's a big issue like we saw in the last summer with the abortion-related constitutional amendment, that got people to the polls. And I know young people, young female and male too, voted in that, but didn't then vote in the general election after that. So it's hard problem to solve.
Yeah, and I'd like to say about two things that could help. One, I guess maybe three. One, that you talked about, same-day registration, which lots of states do. I lived in Minnesota, for example, and bought a house, moved into it, and then 2 weeks later there was a primary, and my wife and I were able to vote in it just by going and showing our utility bills and our valid state ID. And it's easier to do same-day registration here than other states because we have photo ID requirement for voting. You can also put it on a higher turnout day. And also, most people aren't going to like this, at least good government types, but you could involve political parties and do like we do with county commission. And if we had party primaries right now, Whipple would probably be dominating the Democratic primary, although we could figure out whether he is strongly supported within the Democratic primary. And also, Wu and Fry would probably be battling it out in the Republican primary, and Reset could just lie in wait and say that all parties are bad and try to shoot the gap. But instead, we have this four-way contest where voters are going to have a really hard time just figuring out who is a viable candidate and who should I try to not waste my vote on and try to get who I want into the runoff.
Well, and I wonder how much of this is part of also like a larger issue I see covering city and county government of just a lack of civic participation in local government. Like most people probably don't care who the mayor is. They don't think about it. They don't care. That's why they don't show up to vote. The budget hearing the other night, there were like 20 people in a city with 300,000 plus people showed up to talk about I don't know if it's a sign that they don't think they're being heard, or they think things are going well, so they don't need to go. You know, it's tricky to get people interested. As a reporter reporting on this stuff, it's tricky to get people interested in local issues. For whatever reason, it's right there in front of them, but I think it's part of that larger issue too.
Absolutely. And this type of apathy and this kind of interest not only going to affect the mayor's race, but in the last few years, school boards have become really the new battleground for politics. Now, one race in particular in Wichita could change the balance of the USD 259 school board. Case Leon Purvis takes a look at that.
The sort of thing that has come to dominate school board elections, or maybe not dominate them, but play a really large role in them, is this kind of culture war stuff.
Dr. Russell Arben-Fox breaks down what could be coming from the Wichita School Board depending on what happens in the at-large primary on Tuesday. Among those issues, rules regarding trans students, the content in textbooks, and critical race theory.
Like, how are you going to deal with students that are transitioning? How are you going to deal with pronouns in the classroom?
Fox says the conservative-leaning candidates in this case, Jacob Back and Brent Davis.
If you get somebody like Brent Davis elected to the at-large position, then the conservatives who speak for these kinds of socially conservative Christian positions when it comes to these culture war issues.
Meanwhile, Fox says the candidates with a more progressive way of thinking are Jesse Borowski and Melody McCrae Miller.
If you have, for example, somebody like Melody Miller elected to the at-large position, then the kind of moderate or liberal, I guess, though they're not really liberal, they're just, kind of the more conventional voices are going to remain dominant on the school board.
Now, this was a trend that I think we saw start 2 years ago in 2021. But first, I want to start either Chance or David, guys, in your reporting in your communities, why do you think this kind of politicalization has come in? Are people just caring more about the school board and education issues? Is that what's driving a lot of this kind of influx of political influence on these school board races?
Well, it's a planned party initiative by the Republican Party from a grassroots level, and you don't get more grassroots than a school board, to place people within your party on these boards. Large issues have been, COVID, mask mandates, some of these things that have really affected schools, right? That's a wedge issue you can run on, and then those went away, and it's like, well, if that's why you voted for someone, what else do they even care about? So I think a lot of it is just party planning. It's a good place to start if you're going to build up a larger party. But so I think that's what brings a lot of the politics into it, is because it's a national party issue and plan. So they're bringing national political issues and talking points into the race, because what else do they have? A lot of these candidates are recruited or they're just dissatisfied, and that's why they're running, because, like I said, there's not a lot of civic engagement. These people probably don't go to school board meetings every week unless they're running for it or unless they're on the board. How many of them have kids in the district? How many go to school board meetings regularly? I think that's a lot of it. It's easy pickings for political parties to get some power, so they attack it.
Dave, are you seeing something similar down kind of in your coverage area?
We are not, which is kind of fascinating me. I thought I've sort of been waiting for it.
Yeah.
Pretty conservative area, but and I've talked to some school officials about this as to why we haven't, and the responses were kind of like, I just don't think that those communities, Ark City, Winfield, have an appetite really for going after public servants. It's just not how they politicize. But that could change in a heartbeat. Like one incident of some teacher talking about systematic racism, or a poster of a gender diversity or something like that on the wall could spark something like that. And then they could send the troops in to uncover more things. So it's interesting why some places it occurs in some places and it doesn't in others. Thank goodness we're not Florida, I guess, right?
Yeah. And real quick, I know Dr. Allen wanted to ask you, just Chance kind of mentioned this, but we're seeing this kind of national politic discourse getting into these specific races and all that. Is this something that we're going to see just more and more of their local races?
I think we will. And also, I should note here, Wichita being the biggest small town in the country, I mean, I have 2 kids that are in Wichita schools. One of the candidates mentioned, Melody McRae Miller, frequently teaches for my department, although because of her prior political experience in the state legislature, just like we have Republican former operatives and things that teach for us. But I think Chance's point is right. This is national partisan politics in local school boards. And the 1776 project, which backed Brent Davis last time, is a kind of cultural republicanism. Melody Miller is a former liberal Democratic state legislator that was pretty much retired but has re-entered politics because of these national issues. But when you think about it, what do schools need to do? Figure out how to pay teachers, which is hard, how to find substitutes, which there's a horrible shortage of, and also just do the basics of education.
Okay. Well, you just mentioned, what the actions of the school board does, and looking forward, there was a pilot program that is working with these classrooms, trying to improve the amount of teachers that are actually going into the profession. The state of Kansas has launched this program to train that next generation. Once again, Kate's Jocelyn Schifferdecker is going to show us the idea behind this program.
The ongoing teacher shortage in Kansas continues, and it can be devastating to public education.
And when we have a teacher shortage, then we have a future shortage.
That's why the Kansas State Department of Education created its new program, the Registered Teacher Apprenticeship. The goal of this program is to flatten the teacher shortage by giving aspiring teachers the chance to work hands-on in a classroom under the mentorship of an experienced teacher, all while making money and earning their degree.
If your heart is into being a teacher, then we now have a program that can say, we got you. Let's go together and let's be a great teacher.
Not only will this program provide financial benefits to the apprentices, but it can open new doors to people that they never even imagined. For example, students who need to work to support their family and can't pay for a traditional college experience.
These are people that generally could not afford college, could not see their path of going to college, become a teacher.
The apprenticeship will last 4 years. Students will help out with lesson planning, teaching, grading, and more. As they get further into the program, they will be given more responsibilities. Kansas Commissioner of Education Dr. Randy Watson said he hopes the program will be able to offer more spots through the years.
We envision within 4 to 5 years, we would have 500 to 800 young people in this program who would not have been going to school at all, much less to become a teacher.
The pilot program will start this fall with 18 apprentices heading to schools across the state.
This is a really interesting program. It definitely is taking that kind of old school approach to getting people ready for the workforce by having them work alongside while getting their education. We know that there's a shortage of teachers, it's not just here and all that stuff. Is something like this encouraging? David, I'm sure it's not just obviously a Wichita School District or a Sedgwick County issue. It's across the state that we're dealing with these teacher shortages. Is something like this encouraging to you to address this problem?
Yeah, I think so. It's not taking place in any district in Cali County, but they are having problems with hiring teachers. I know one district they're still short 2 teachers, and there's I think a week left before they're supposed to report. And so I was interested to learn that there are kind of a pool of programs that have been greenlighted by the state, not just this one, but there's a program where college students who are in a different major but decide maybe they want to go into teaching, then can get some credits in teaching and then go right into to be a public school teacher. And also where they can, if they're getting their education degree, they can actually be a full-time teacher as long as they're working toward that degree, almost finished. And I think they get checked on every 2 to 3 weeks to make sure they're doing what they're, and they can actually be teachers, full-time teachers. So there's a lot going on to address the teacher shortage that hopefully doesn't relax the standards and the professionalism. I guess we're kind of desperate.
Yeah, and we've seen some of that in the State House this year when it came to some of the right requirements and just to get more people in the room, especially substitutes and all that. Dr. Allen, I think education funding has always been something that has been hotly talked about in Kansas and all that stuff. When you see a program like this, Is it one that you think may get more support, and maybe the Kansas Department of Education may get more support from the legislature if it does seem successful?
Well, it makes sense to try to use any kind of pipeline model that that you can think of to get people into the classroom. And part of the reason is because so many people are exiting the classroom, because in Kansas we have a problem of paying people less than surrounding states, and also states that other people just want to move away to. That we are going to have a baby boomer retirement problem in teaching, just like we are in, frankly, most professional fields. And also, I mean, just the experience of being a public school teacher gets harder all the time, because the educational needs of students never go away. The social needs of students increase. And also, like we've talked about already, there are things that then get imported into classrooms that teachers have to deal with. And so it makes sense to basically throw everything you can at education. But also, it takes money, it takes a lot of it. Public education, so K-12 education, is more than half of our state's budget. And when you have legislators that don't want to increase taxes and don't want to increase spending, then it really puts us in a box on what is the major expense of schools day to day, which is paying teachers.
Yeah. Now, I know since it is a big week coming up, Tuesday, the election, to go back to some of our earlier discussions, one question that I am curious about is that we're seeing in school boards more of that partisan, politics get in there. We're seeing so much money in this mayor's race. Chance, do you think local elections are now going to just be more and more under the microscope of political parties, of national figures, and this is kind of that intro to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I hope so. It's always been a political exercise. I don't think it's, we may have been under illusions or naive at one point, but I mean, if you have a 6-1 majority on the city council, you can say it's nonpartisan and everyone kind of chuckles, but it's always kind of a partisan affair. If you want to get elected, there are political parties that help you get elected. They know what issues excite voters. They spend all their time focusing on building a machine to get voters out for their parties. That's what you see with school boards. There's a lot of people voting who don't have kids in the school district and don't care about what's going on in the classroom. But they can, if you give them a national political issue, they may show up to the polls and vote for your candidate. So yeah, it's here. It's been here.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to want to encourage all of you to go out and vote this week, but this does it for us today on Kansas Week. Again, we want to thank you all, Neil, Chance, and David, for coming along for this great discussion today. We'd also like to thank our news partners at the Wichita Eagle, KSN, and Cake for sharing their materials with us. Now, we'd love to continue this discussion with you online. So be sure to follow PBS Kansas both on Facebook, Twitter to continue that conversation. For now, stay safe and have a great week.